First of all, thank you to Ryan and the ABCA for inviting me to speak this year. I've learned so much from these conventions in the past. It's an incredible honor to be on the other side now and have the chance to share my thoughts and give back to this great community. I want to talk today for youth baseball. We have this incredible opportunity to build the skills and tools that allow our young athletes to have success, not just right now, but as they progress through their careers. So today I want to talk about what those skills are and maybe challenge you to think a little differently on how we approach skill development with young athletes. And I want to start with an example here that may seem a little silly, so bear with me. But imagine we have a player who's a circle, and our task is to teach him how to get from point A to point B as fast as he can. I think the traditional approach and probably the typical approach that we see in youth baseball would be to look to professional athletes and see what they're doing. So let's say you pick your favorite professional athlete and he rolls from A to B. So you show video to your young circle player of guys rolling, you explain the mechanics of it, and maybe you take him through slow motion drills. And sure enough, the circle player picks it up quickly and can easily roll from A to B. We call this the prescriptive approach because we're prescribing a movement solution or a mechanic to our athlete, in this case, rolling. But imagine we have another player who's a square. If we try to teach him how to roll, he's going to have a tough time, right? It doesn't come naturally to him. But through a lot of work and determination, maybe we get him rolling, but it's this odd bouncing motion, and he's not able to get from A to B as fast as the circle player is. And this is a problem that we run into all the time as coaches. Every player we interact with is unique, and their physical traits like height, strength, flexibility, and vision all affect how they're able to move and how they're able to perform tasks. And with youth athletes, these are constantly changing as they grow and develop. So when we teach with this prescriptive approach, it's focused so much on the correct or the ideal movement solution, it becomes very difficult to find what's optimal for each individual. And we also see very fragile movement solutions from players that are taught in this manner. So what do I mean by that? It means they're very dependent on a coach to correct them when they stray or when they start to struggle. Okay? And when they move on to the next level and they have a new coach, they may not get the same level of feedback, the same verbiage. The coach may want them to move in a different way. So the success that they're having right now with you may not translate as they move on to the next level. So how do we fix this? What's an alternative way of teaching the athletes? Well, let's take our circle and square player again, but this time instead of telling them how to get from A to B, instead of prescribing a movement for them, we just tell them that they need to do it in 3 seconds or less. And then we encourage them to experiment and try out different ideas to find what works. And we can imagine they'll try a bunch of different things, most of which won't work, but eventually the circle player will find that rolling is best for him, and maybe the square player finds that sliding is best for him. They're both able to complete the task consistently, but they've found solutions that are unique to them and their bodies. Now, this is a simple example, but it demonstrates the idea of self-organization, which says that movement solutions emerge based on the environment and the constraints, not by building a set of instructions on how to move. So if we want to change a player's mechanics, we should look at changing the environment or the constraints that are imposed on him to affect a change. And this is where the term constraints-led approach comes from. And it has a lot of benefits. Players are able to learn movement solutions that are individualized for them. They learn goal-directed behavior. So in the prescriptive approach, the idea was very much if we perform the action in the correct way, we get the desired result. Here we've flipped that around. So now the focus is on understanding the desired result, and that leads to finding the movement solution. And then players also learn autonomy and ownership. Because nobody's giving them the solution, they're learning it on their own. They're the ones in charge of how they move and how they perform. So when we talk about skills that scale, to me, it's not about trying to teach a young athlete the same mechanics that are being used at the professional level. That'd be like trying to teach our square player how to roll. He's not going to have success right now, and it's going to be a struggle for him. So to me, the skills that scale are things like adaptability, goal-directed behavior, and autonomy and ownership. If we think about athletes that are successful, it's the players that are able to adapt to change, whether that's changes in their strength as they grow and develop, or changes in the game as pitchers start throwing harder, better breaking balls, or just the faster speed of the game. So how do we take this idea of experimentation, constraint-led training, and take it into catchers and still have a productive use of our time? Well, we need to have a good understanding of what the result is that we want. Both us as a coach need to understand that, and the players need to have a good understanding of their desired result. So if you follow me on social media, you're probably already familiar with these, but we consider a reception to be good if it has a one-directional move back to the zone. So we're not catching the baseball and the glove goes down before up or out before in, right? The ball hits the glove and it moves in a straight line back to the zone. And we want that move to happen fast, so a high glove speed. And as you watch this video on the right here, you'll notice those are about the only two things that are constant between all these different catchers. We see a ton of variability between each player, and between different catchers, and with a single catcher between different pitches. We see different stances being utilized, whether it's a right knee down, left knee down, traditional stances, different body angles, different setups on the plate. We see different glove loads, guys going all the way to the ground, guys relaxing just below the strike zone. And we see different presentations, guys finishing at extension, guys finishing with a big flexion move, everywhere in between. We see guys rolling through the presentation with a big, large glove movement, and we see smaller glove movements and holding that presentation. Okay, so we have all this variability in how we can go about achieving that desired result. So when we go to set our players loose to start experimenting, they understand their desired result, and we want to let them play with all these different variations and let them find what works best for them. So the first video here is of Braden, and it's a great example of the power of this experimentation. So this is from an actual practice, and the only instruction I gave Braden was to play with the depth of his presentation. So he's going to try and finish at full extension, he's going to try and finish with a big flexion move, and he's going to play with everywhere in between those two distances. And his goal is just to come out of this and be able to explain to me what he likes, what he thinks gives him the best result, and what he really doesn't like. Okay, so he's got a teammate feeding the machine for him. I'm off onto the side talking with the player that just finished. So Braden's on his own here, right? This is his time to experiment, his time to figure things out for himself. And just a note before I play the video, you'll notice Braden looking at the screen behind him between a lot of his catches. We use a free program called Canovia to give the guys a delayed video feed. So whenever you see Braden looking at the screen, he's just watching the catch that he just made. And we use this as a tool not only to let them see the result, but really to build that autonomy and ownership. Braden has all the tools he needs to be able to make a decision for himself on whether it was a good catch or not, right? So he's not reliant on me as a coach to tell him whether a catch was good or bad. Okay. So remember, the only instruction he got was to play with the depth of his presentation. And this is his very first time ever messing around with this. So you're going to see some bad catches in here. This is from an actual practice. This is his first time. He's learning new things as he goes here. But one of the cool things about this experimental approach is how quickly players are able to make adjustments. So he just had a really bad catch. He's getting a little bit better there, right? And then the third one, he really starts to figure things out. So this is a great sign as a coach because it lets me know he's getting outside of his comfort zone, right? He's getting outside his box of what he's familiar with and what he thinks works, and he's trying new things. And while he's trying these, he's having to change everything about his movement. So he's changing his approach to the baseball. He's changing his glove position at contact. He's learning a ton about pre-tensioning the muscles in his shoulder and his arm, and how his timing and strength really affects the end result of his catch. So without having to describe all this information to him, he's learning all of this on his own. And as he comes towards the end, he really kind of figures out something he likes, and we'll see him start to repeat the same move over and over. So again, without much discussion with him, me as a coach, I'm able to see that, okay, he's finding something he likes. He's starting to try and fine tune it. It's time to move on. Okay. So we'll also play with the distance of the presentation. So Braden here is going to exaggerate the finish. So he's doing this big glove move all the way over his head. And this is something I love to do with guys that are either brand new to manipulating the baseball, because it gives them great feedback on how they're approaching the ball. If we try and catch the baseball from above, it's going to take a lot of effort and strength to try and move that baseball above your head. But if we approach from below, we get a little bit better timing. All of a sudden, that move becomes super easy. So this is a great way just for players to get that feeling. We'll also play with pocket position on the presentation. So Braden here is going to finish with the pocket square to the pitcher, and he's also going to play with a bit of a glove roll. And this one's a great example of how a simple cue can affect more than just what we're cueing. So Braden usually likes to finish in more of an extended finish, but here all of a sudden he's going to more of this flexion motion because he's focused more on his glove. So that's an important point, that we don't necessarily have to cue the one thing we want to change. The players will experiment and find new complete movement solutions, even though we're cueing only a small part of that. Okay, so we'll also play with what the player's doing before he catches the ball, so the glove load. So here Braden's playing with the timing of the glove load, going down early and waiting for the ball, or relaxing a little bit later. We'll play with the distance of the glove load, so going all the way to the ground or relaxing just below the strike zone. And pocket position and kind of pre-pitch sequencing a little bit. So really anything the player can think of, we'll let them try out. But here Braden's working with that pocket kind of tucked back between his legs. He's putting it flat on the ground and kind of twisting it into the ground. We'll also have guys work on just sliding the glove forward, really trying to find, if they're a rhythm guy, trying to find a rhythm they like. But ultimately just seeing how these movements affect their approach to the baseball, so that they can select something that they like. And then if we're working edges of the zone, we'll do lateral loads just to help them kind of get around the baseball a little bit. And of course, we work a ton of different stances. So here, Braden's just going to alternate between a right knee down, a left knee down, and a traditional stance. But the guys are always playing around with their foot positioning, their body angles, their positioning on the plate, and chest angle, right? They're constantly trying to find what gives them the most value on that reception. So an example of chest angle here, Braden's starting with that chest very forward, and he's slowly raising it up as he goes through. So this allows him to really find where he can leverage his strengths the best, which is really important for young catchers because they don't necessarily have the same shoulder strength as adults do. So he's trying to find that balance between what gives him the best strength and what still allows that glove to be mobile. So all of those are an example of what we consider the experimental phase. Okay, so this is where we're posing a novel movement problem to our athlete, and he's having to solve it on his own. He's having to figure out how to move in new ways to get a result that he's never tried to get before. And through that whole process, he's having to self-evaluate and see how those movements are affecting the desired result. So we're really building this autonomy and ownership, and definitely building goal-directed behavior with the guys during this phase. But once they find something they like, something they think is going to work, we immediately move over to a challenge and variability phase. So this is a much more game-like environment where we're forcing the player to adapt to all the variations that they see in the games. Okay, so the focus is really on this idea of building adaptability. We want them to find movement solutions that adapt. We want to challenge those movements and find where they break down. And when we find a weak spot, we just go back to the experimental phase, focus on that area, really feed the failure, and let them experiment and find something new that's going to work in that area. And then they go back to challenge and variability. So they constantly are going through this cycle. And with the young guys that are pretty new to discovering some of these movements, they may cycle through this 3 or 4 times in a 15-minute session. But over time, as they get more and more comfortable, as they start selecting movements that are adaptable, we'll spend more time in challenge and variability, and we have to start stepping up that challenge to really find where their movement solution breaks down, to really try and find any sort of weakness in their movements. Okay. So in this challenge and variability phase, I think it's really important that perception and action are coupled. Okay, so we want that perception piece to be as close to game-like as we can make it. So we move the machine all the way back to full distance. We turn the velocity up to what we expect them to see in a game. And then we start playing with locations, in and out, up, down. We want to see how they handle missed spots, if their movement solution is good for missed spots, and how they handle breaking pitches or different pitch types that they expect to see in a game. Now, if they're able to handle all of that good, they're getting good results, we're not finding any weak spots, then we want to go to a next level game. Like, so we want to increase the speed of the pitches. We want to see how they handle big changes in velocity. So a fast pitch followed by a really slow pitch. And how do they handle legit breaking balls? Okay. So again, we're just trying to find where that movement solution breaks down so that we can target that area and experiment with it more. Then we have some drills we like to do that aren't necessarily game-like, but they really promote this idea of adaptability. So this is one the guys love. It's a glove change competition. So Jesse here, he's one of our high school guys. He has to change gloves between every pitch, and his teammates get to pick what glove he has to change to. They can also move the plate around on him if they want to, so they can force him to catch an arm side pitch followed by a glove side pitch. Okay? And they're in charge of grading his result. So if they think it's a fast one-directional move, they give him a point. If they think it could be better, he gets no points. So you get this really fun dynamic where Jesse's teammates are trying to make things as hard as they possibly can on him, and Jesse's being forced to make all these subtle adjustments constantly from pitch to pitch. And if you're curious on what gloves we're using, I love the Valley training gloves. They make fantastic catcher's mitts. I think here we're using, that was a 32-inch half web. We have a 32-inch weighted glove, a 26-inch undersized glove, an oversized glove. I think that one's like a 36. And then we use All-Stars donut and wrist weights as well. Okay. We'll also play around with different ball weights. So I know C25 and Driveline both make different weighted leather baseballs. So here I'm just feeding Braden different weighted balls at random. These range from 3 ounces to 8 ounces. And the idea here is I just want him to find a movement solution that's stable with all these different impact forces. Okay, so sometimes through this process, a player may pick a movement solution that isn't the best, or they may have bad habits from how they were coached before. So how do we go about changing that with a constraint-led approach, right? How do we do that without prescribing a corrective action? Well, as we talked before, we introduce a new constraint. So this is an example of that. If we have a player that really has a lot of body movement, he really likes to dive towards the baseball, or he's got a lot of head movement going on, we can just put a glove on his head and tell him not to have it, don't let it fall off, okay? So we've introduced this new constraint of the glove on his head. So now if he tries to do his old movement solution, he can't get the result he wants. The glove keeps falling off. So we're forcing him to expand his mind and find a new movement solution that can still have a fast one-directional move, but also keeps the glove on its head. And this is really like the fundamental level of what constraint-led training is about. And then along those same lines, rather than prescribing or instructing a player to keep his thumb down on low pitches, we can just exaggerate the angle of that pitch. So Jesse makes this look pretty easy here, but if you have a player that's trying to keep that thumb horizontal and really get his wrist under the baseball, he's going to have a really tough time trying to catch this ball. Okay. So again, we're not telling him how to correct it. We're not trying to fit him in a box of what we as a coach feel is correct. We're pushing him away from his deficient movement solution and letting him find something new that's going to work for him. So by taking this kind of experiment and challenge approach and allowing players to self-organize, we're seeing players build these extremely resilient skills. Right? They're not dependent on having a coach around. They're able to self-evaluate. They're able to self-adjust. And they're choosing movement solutions that are highly adaptable. So they're able to adjust and adapt to the changes that they see in games, which means their skills are translating from practice to the game environment. We're seeing better intent and focus in practice because the players are so involved in it and they have a good understanding of what they're doing. The intent and focus is better. We're seeing better communication. They understand what they like, they understand what they dislike, and they're able to communicate those feelings a lot more effectively. And probably most important, it's a fun environment, right? It's engaging and interactive, which is huge for the young guys to have them looking forward to coming and doing receiving work. All right, so blocking. Is there an ideal blocking form? You can probably already guess my feelings on this, but I think the traditional teach for blocking for a long time has been get down early and get both knees on the ground. And we see this form blocking being taught a lot. But when we look at games, we almost never see form blocks in actual games. So this is going to cycle through a few clips here that I just paused the moment the ball hit the catcher. Okay? And I think out of these 30-some clips, there's maybe one that is close to a form block. And I really think by teaching this idea of a form block, we're emphasizing aspects of the blocking that aren't necessarily that important to a block. So to me, I have 3 keys that I really focus on with blocking. And the first is that the decision to block is made late, not early. I want my guys to find a movement solution that's quick and efficient that allows them to make that decision to block later in the ball flight. The more ball flight they're able to see, the better that decision is going to be. Then the second key is that the knees play no role in a successful block. Whether you have 1 knee on the ground, 2 knees on the ground, or no knees on the ground, we see that guys are able to successfully control the baseball from all these different stances. So I think this is something that's been taught for a long time that maybe isn't necessarily that true. And then the third key is that the glove is the most mobile part of the catcher. So we want to use it to our advantage. I want my guys to feel athletic back there, like they have the freedom to make a play on that baseball, more like we're fielding a ground ball rather than just dropping to our knees and being a wall and letting the baseball hit us. It should be an interactive process. So when we go into blocking drills, this first one here, we don't do this one very often. It's more of something we'll do with a player that's either brand new to blocking or a player that's really been taught this traditional type of form block. So I got Braden down in a right knee down stance, and I'm just giving him short hops. They're super easy blocks. He's not learning a ton from this, but he is learning that a block can be a simple move, right? It doesn't have to be this large, complex movement trying to get out of a traditional stance. Regardless of what stance we're in, the chest is usually in a pretty good position already to make a block, and we just need to make sure we get in front of it. The right knee down also really makes guys use their gloves more because they feel like they're so exposed in the 5-hole. So it helps promote that feeling a little bit. But again, we don't do this one very often. We'll do it maybe 1 or 2 times with a new player. If we need to work mobility, so lateral range, I love putting a belt on the guys and pulling them around with a band. So Braden here will go through right knee down stuff. He'll also do some traditional stuff, and I'm just pulling him in the direction of the move. The idea here is to allow him to try and figure out how to organize his body to be able to move laterally. I'm not giving him any instruction. I'm not giving him corrective feedback. He's figuring it out on his own. And right there, he fell down on the one before, and now he figured out, okay, if I keep my hips lower, maybe if I don't try and pull that back knee in, I can keep my balance a little better. And he does the same thing on the other side. He struggles when he tries to get to this traditional form block, but when he kind of lets loose and keeps that back knee up, it becomes a lot easier for him. So we'll do this. We call these assistive bands, we'll also put it on the other side and resist the movement. So he has to move against the band. And that just helps him really focus on where his strength comes from during that move. Probably what we spend 90% of our time on with blocking is read-react drills. So here we're using the ATEC Hyperlight balls. Fantastic little foam balls. If you've never used them, they fly pretty true to an actual baseball, and we can pump the velo up on them. So here the majority of pitches are going to be strikes, and I want to try and lull him into this receiving mindset, and then every once in a while he'll get a ball in the dirt. The speed on these, I think the radar back there says these are about 62, 64, so this is about game speed for Braden here. And the whole idea is we want to push that decision-making process as late in the ball flight as we can, right? So we do all of our blocking stuff at game speed. If they're doing good with that one, we want to increase the challenge. So here we're pumping the speed up. That one was 79, way too fast for Braden. He's never going to see this in a game. You can see he can barely even catch the baseball. He's having trouble even getting to the ball. Okay, so this is really fast, but what we're doing is we're shortening that window of decision-making time even more, right? He has almost no time to make a decision of block versus catch, so he's forced to think receive, 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 and react to the block. And we'll do competitions with the guys on this. We give them a point if they successfully control a block. We don't give them anything for receiving it or for picking it, but they lose 3 points if they try and block a ball that's in the air. So the incentive for them is to really get this receiving mindset and find a movement solution for blocking that allows them to make that late decision. We'll also do this with lateral blocks. So we'll set the machine up on their knees and mix balls in the air versus balls in the dirt. So again, just read and react, this time with some lateral movement involved. For throwing, we're fortunate enough at our facility, we have some fantastic pitching guys. So all of our catchers are encouraged to go through the throwing program, which means I don't have to deal with throwing too much. I really only deal with our guys on transfers and footwork. So for transfers, this is our main drill for transfers. I'm just giving him short feeds, letting him get a lot of different transfers in and get the baseball out. Kind of along with my theme of everything, I don't think there's a correct way to transfer a baseball. So I'm letting them find whatever's natural to them, and we're looking to see if there's any issues with their current movement. Are they dropping a lot of baseballs? Is a really slow transfer? Or is there anything that we think is going to make it more difficult for them to get to their normal throwing position? And if there is, then we'll make those changes. But for the most part, most young guys are pretty good with their transfers. For footwork, this might be my favorite footwork drill. We just call this turning two. Braden's going to start to the left of the plate, straight behind the plate, and to the right of the plate. And I'm just giving him a nice, easy long hop. Okay? And I like this because the player has a lot of time to try and organize their body, get into their best throwing position, and they feel free to do that when they're standing up and moving around, which is something we don't necessarily have the benefit of when we're in our stance. So here I really want them to feel how their body wants to organize, how it wants to get through that baseball, and we want to transfer those same ideas into their stance at the plate. So at the plate, sometimes we'll do inline transfers. We don't do this a ton, but if you have a guy that has issues with timing with his feet, right, when that right foot's picking up, when it's planting, this is a great way for them to really feel that rhythm. Right, it's a very easy move for the catcher. His hips aren't getting locked up with trying to rotate or anything. So it's a great way for them to start to feel kind of that rhythm. And I will say on all of these, I prefer if the guys throw the baseball. But, I mean, catchers throw a lot, so sometimes we have to give their arm a break. But if we are trying to work something specific with them, if they are having issues with that timing, it might be better to have them actually finish with a throw. This is the one that we normally do right after turning two, so we're standing square behind the plate. So Braden here is really trying to get that same feeling, that same smoothness he had from the turning two drill and transfer it into this standing position behind the plate. We do it standing first, just again, because we feel more free to move when we're standing up, right? Those hips can kind of swing out to the side a little bit easier. And again, we're not giving him any instruction. We're not giving him any corrective feedback. We're letting him try and figure out how to get to his best throwing position. Then from there, he drops down into his stance, and same idea. He's trying to take those same movements he just had standing up and get those into his stance. And you can see Braden's not too happy with it. He's looking at the video to see what went wrong. For guys that do like right knee down with runners on, we'll work that. Really, whatever stance the player picks to use with runners on base, we're going to work throws out of it just to help them figure out how they can make that throw. Okay, but Braden, I don't think he's ever done right knee down in game. I made him do this for the video, so he's figuring it out for the first time right now. All right, so that was a lot of information extremely fast. But I think if there's one takeaway from this presentation, it would be that there is no correct or incorrect way to catch. And there's a huge amount of benefits to allowing our players the freedom to discover their movement solutions on their own, rather than trying to fit them into a box. And allowing them to learn this adaptability, this goal-directed behavior, and autonomy and ownership. Because I truly believe those are the things that are going to make them successful as they move through their career and start to face more and more challenges in their game. I love talking catching, so feel free to reach out to me. I got my Twitter up there. I also run a website, learn.stoutcatching.com, where we have drills, a video library, online courses, and a discussion board. So if you want to chat with me or other coaches from around the nation, it's free to sign up, but that's a great place to do it. Thank you again to Ryan and the ABCA for having me out. I'm really glad we were still able to do this in this crazy year. And congrats to the Dodgers, and good luck to everybody this year. Thank you.
Welcome, Zach. Again, thank you to Game Changer for their continued support of the youth stage. Get into the exhibit area and please get in there and thank Game Changer for all their support. So, Zach, thanks for coming on with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What's your initial thoughts here after watching
it? Good. Hopefully I got kind of my point across. Definitely a different perspective, I think. So I think it's good contrast to kind of what's been around in the catching world for a long time recently. So,
got some questions in the chat here. In receiving with youth guys, where do you start?
It depends on the player, which unfortunately is probably going to be my answer to a lot of questions.
I love it, though. I think coaches need to hear it. Like, it really does depend on the individual.
Yeah. So we'll start by first letting them catch how they normally catch, right? So before we ever instruct anything, before we ever show them videos or talk about what our goal is with receiving, I want to get them on the machine. I want to film them so that we have something to compare to once we do start talking about our desired result with receiving. But I would say probably one of the typical things we do with most guys is a lot of the young guys aren't used to manipulating baseballs. So really exaggerating that glove movement is one of the first things we'll do with guys, just to get them used to trying out these new movements.
I mean, how many guys do you get that walk in the facility that have never been filmed or seen themselves before?
Probably most of them. Yeah, it's kind of amazing for how easy it is to get video nowadays. How little guys use it, and honestly, I think that just kind of shows us where the lack of knowledge is, right? They don't understand the value of it. If they don't understand what they're trying to achieve when they're catching, right, they're not going to get any value out of the video. So why look at the video?
Where do you start with presentation then?
With the presentation, probably the first presentation thing we'll do with most guys is the depth of the catch. But again, it's going to depend on the player and what I feel is going to be a good starting point for them. But probably the majority will start with depth of the catch unless there's something else going on that we need to address first.
When did you decide to start implementing delayed videos?
As soon as I figured out how to do it. It's something I've wanted for a long time. And I only recently moved into a facility last year or the year before. So I finally had kind of a controlled environment to play around with some of this stuff.
I told a coach, I'm like, hey, wait till you see Zach's presentation, because if I could have afforded it and you could figure out a way to not get monitors broke, I would have them all over the field. Seriously, I would have delayed videos all over the field so a player could complete an action and then look and see how it looked, and to get instant feedback from their movements and take some of the coaching portion out of it. But it's going to be expensive, but I would love to have a monitor that can get hit by a baseball that's not going to break, because you could have them all over the field.
Yeah, and the guys at our facility they use Apple stuff, and they found an app for the iPads that does it. So,
well, last time you were here, you didn't know what the Mac version is. Do you know the name of the Mac version for it?
I still don't.
Okay.
Once I heard Apple, I was like, I don't care.
Oh, I love it. When did the light go on for you with the one knee catching stuff, and that it was going to work for youth players?
So I think it was probably last year I started talking with Tanner a lot more. And I was really intrigued by it because it kind of clicked with a lot of the things I felt when I was playing, and a lot of the things I wished I could have done as a catcher myself. So I was like, okay, well, let's try it out with the guys and see how it is. And obviously I'm not big on forcing the players to do stuff, but just experimenting with it and encouraging guys to try it out. They really took to it pretty quickly. So yeah, it really just started a year ago talking with Tanner and then just leaping in, trying it out. So,
and this is a little off topic, but for your decision to work in a facility as opposed to working with the team in a team setting, was there anything along your path that maybe decided that for you? Because I think we have a lot of guys listening in that, do I work in a facility? Do I go coach high school or coach in a team? What really was that decision for you?
I think something I was always frustrated with was how few catchers I could work with when I was associated with a team, right? Especially at like the high school level, you get your 4 to 8 catchers. And I really wanted to have a bigger impact, especially out here in Colorado, on just kind of the overall catching community out here. So really moving to the private sector and having the chance to work with a wider range of catchers and just more catchers.
What role does facilities play in getting players game ready? I mean, is that a huge part of it, or is it just to help them kind of improve on their movements, or does it all blend into itself where if I feel like I get him better in here, that's going to scale to games?
Well, I think the goal is to have it scale to games, right?
Yes.
If that's not our goal, I think we're doing something wrong.
Yep.
But I mean, hopefully we can get to a point where the private sector and the actual teams, don't clash. We're one and the same. I know Rogue, where I'm at, we do a lot of outreach to coaches, trying to help educate coaches. And really I think the mission for all of us is just try and make baseball better, right? And get as much information out there as we can.
And you talk to a lot of guys. What are coaches doing much better now than maybe when you first started in this profession?
Oh, man. I think there's a lot more education now. There's a lot more information out there. Right. So I think guys are taking not necessarily more serious. I don't want to say nobody was taking it serious before, but it's just a little easier to find that information, right? It's less about your connections and more about just investing the time to find what you want.
I mean, you're big on the skill acquisition part. What kind of pointed you in that direction? What resources, like this is the direction that I'm going to head?
Yeah. Probably a couple of years back, hearing some coaches talk about constraints in practice. And I was like, well, what is a constraint?
Yes.
Why are they using that term? Right. It's not a word you would just randomly pick up and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to call this a constraint. So I figured there was something behind that. So I really started digging towards that, found skill acquisition, and just kind of blew my mind. I was like, oh, this is what I want as a coach. Yep. Right. This is really the framework that guides how we develop athletes, right? And what's going to work best and what's not. So it kind of led me out of the fog of guessing at what I should be doing with players and just picking random drills and hoping they worked, and really giving me some sort of structure on how to build a practice, and really how to build that development in the athletes.
Jake Lindmeyer jumped in on this one. Blocking, do you discuss where to miss via direction? For example, runner on first base versus second and third. Also, do you discuss paddle blocking with them, or do you want them to try to block everything?
So we talk a lot about our expectations with blocking as far as what range we're expected to handle. And really all of our guys, the goal is to be highly successful on pitches within our knees. Right. Our goal in a game is to be 90% successful on dirt balls between our knees. And really anything outside of that is kind of a bonus, right? We don't want to ignore it completely, right? We still got to control some of those pitches, right? But if we can be 90% successful within the catcher's box, we're going to have a great time behind the plate there, right? We're going to prevent a lot of runs on those dirt balls. As far as talking about weighting a certain side, we'll have those conversations. I don't think we've implemented anything specifically in the practice plans about, if it's a right-hander, the slider is going to usually be tugged. It's going to go to your arm side as a catcher.
Well, because the goal is you want to land it in between your feet, right? And no matter where you're going, you want to land the ball in between your knees, right? One, for easier to scramble and pick it up, but also for the guy trying to advance bases where it's much harder on them to make a decision. If they're trying to move too much and the ball moves, then the base runner gets a much better angle on the ball, right? Where they might be able to get a better jump, where if it's now just landing in between their knees, the runner's probably not going to advance, correct?
Yeah. So if we're talking like the direction of the rebound,
yes,
our guys, we always just want them square to the pitcher, right?
Yep.
If we're blocking to our left, we can get away with a bit more of a turn, right? Because it's going to end up on our arm side. But for most of our guys, we're just talking stay square to the pitcher, right? If anything, we're trying to get rid of any of that turn as they go.
Yeah, and that's changed a lot because, in the old days, you were trying to get guys to turn all the time. I played infield and outfield, but I had to coach catchers the first 2 years that I coached, and apologize to everybody that had to deal with me at Evansville the first 2 years coaching catchers because I was brutal at it. We had somebody that was listening to Coach Lee's presentation that asked about the delayed video feed. How do you set your monitor up?
So I use a Microsoft Surface, so just a laptop, and run Canovia on that. So if it's in like a bullpen, the guys are just looking at the laptop. We have it on a tripod. Now our facility has TVs, so I can cast it onto one of the TVs. So that's what you saw us using in the video. But for bullpen stuff like that, we literally put it on a tripod and just set it where they can see it, right? And hope it doesn't get hit with a baseball.
Like I said, we need to have monitors that can get hit with the baseball. All you future tech guys out there and industry people, figure out with the pitching labs and all that how to get live pitching in the pitching lab, and where a guy can actually swing the bat with the ground for place and all that. You're going to make $1 million. So just a pro tip out there for that. Hey, any drills you didn't get to in this? I know it's a tough short amount of time, but any drills that you didn't get to that maybe you're using with guys right now?
I think it hit on all the big ones that we do, that really make up the bulk of our workouts. Like anything, we're always experimenting and playing around with stuff. One thing that we're doing a lot more now is having, guys stand in as the umpire. So when they're getting receiving work, if we got extra guys and they're standing around doing nothing, I'd rather they get in there and start seeing what it looks like from the umpire's perspective.
Yes.
Because
how much communication within their peer group are they telling them, like, hey, that looked like a strike, that looked like a ball? How much communication is their peer group telling them on how they're presenting pitches?
It depends on the kid and the age group we're talking about. I think the goal would be to open that communication up, but that's not something we force, right? If I don't see it happening, it's probably something we'll talk about. We'll maybe talk on the value of what some input would be there, or have a discussion about what looks different from the umpire's perspective, in the hopes that once they start thinking about that, we'll start seeing that conversation start to happen, right? So that'd be the sign to me as a coach that, yeah, something's clicking. They're starting to get it. Yeah.
How do you handle a parent that comes into your facility and tells you you're not instructing their kid enough?
They can leave. They can go somewhere else.
I'm just saying from a verbal, because obviously probably as a parent and you're paying the money and you walk into a facility and kids are doing things which are great, but there's not a lot of, perceived coaching going on. I mean, do you ever have those conversations? I know your track record is tremendous, but do you ever have those conversations with a parent that maybe doesn't know much about it? That, hey,
so very first day when they come in, right, we talk about the method. We talk about what it's going to look like, how it's different than what they're used to seeing. I got a ton of that info on my site, so I try and prep them beforehand so that they have some idea of what they're getting into. But honestly, I haven't had that come up yet. Most of the time, parents don't stick around to watch. They just kind of drop them off and go, especially with COVID and everything they're not even allowed in.
That's probably been nice, hasn't
it? Good and bad. I mean, it depends on the age
kidding,
group.
Parents out there, I'm kidding.
Like real young kids, I'd actually prefer if parents are there because a lot of the stuff's so simple. It's like you can do it at home, right? I think there's value when you're young and having your dad be involved in that, right? Both to the dad or the mom and the kid, right?
Yeah. How long did it take you to get to that point of not overcoaching?
Once I started down this path, it probably took a solid year before I was just starting to feel a lot more comfortable with it, right? It was definitely a battle to get away from kind of my instincts to prescribe a solution, right? You see a kid struggling. I have a pretty good idea of what I think is going to help him, right? So it's tough to resist that urge to just be like, do this. Because
your heart's in the right place. You want to try to help them. And all coaches go through this. Like, you put a lot of their successes on yourself. If you have any skin in the game and you care about the people that you're coaching, you want them to succeed and do well. And so your first instinct is going to be to jump in there and try to fix whatever's going wrong for them.
Right. So something I found that really helped me through that was if I think I know something that's going to really him out, then I'm going to suggest he tries that and the complete opposite of it and everything in between, right? And then we'll do that for a little while, and then we're going to talk about what he liked, what felt better, right? So just making sure that whatever he decides to do, it's his decision to do it. It's not me making him do it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Can you dive into a little bit of the research? Because I know anybody that's kind of new to the presentation part and the amount of movement, can you dive into the research on why catchers are doing that now and for strike call purposes?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting more strike calls. So I think we're still in a gray area right now of what exactly is going on that's making that happen. I know on my side, I've put out at least my theory on why I think it's working and how it's affecting the umpire's perception. But I think for the most part, it's just, the guys that are manipulating the baseball are getting more strike calls. So, but we're still kind of in the infancy of it, trying to figure out what are the key parts of it that are responsible for the increased strikes. So to me, I think it's that. Yeah, to me, I think it's the glove path efficiency, so that one directional move, and glove velocity. I think those two things are the keys. Yeah.
Is there a plan versus right knee down or left knee down with runners on first or third for throwdowns?
It's going to depend on the guy. We work basically everything. So most of the guys are comfortable with one knee in a game with runners on base. They're comfortable with traditional, and it's up to them. So we have a lot of discussions, and sometimes I'll try and encourage them to try one knee a bit more in games if they're a little hesitant, just because I want them to experience it, especially in off-season stuff for like the high school guys, right? It's an off-season game. It doesn't really matter. Let's try it out. Let's see if it works, because you never know till you try it. Maybe you do a lot better out of a one knee stance than you do out of traditional. So really just trying to help them get over that fear of I might be awful if I do it this way. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't, right? But we won't know until we try it.
How do you know when a player is ready to go from that experiment phase to challenge phase? I mean, does that feel, what's with your eyes telling you that, okay, we can go to that challenge phase now?
As soon as they think they found something they like. So as soon as they say, this feels good, right, we immediately go to game-like, right? Our goal is to spend as much time as we possibly can in that game-like environment. So, if we're receiving and he says he likes, not full extension, but a little closer to extension, okay, good. Let's move to game-like. Let's try it and see how it works. Now, maybe he gets 10 pitches in and he hates it and it's not working. We go right back to kind of that experimentation phase. Right. But it's quick. As soon as they think they found something, we immediately go to the challenge phase.
How much do you have guys in season then with you?
In season, probably not at all. Right. Catchers have a pretty high demand on their time as it is. So really, I treat winter as our big development time. It's their time to really focus on themselves, right? Especially right before pitchers start throwing all their pins again, right? They have this good kind of gap period to start working on their skills, finding some things they like so that when they go into their bullpen sessions, right, they have something they can work on.
How often in the off season are they in there with you?
We do once a week. So the guys with me get like an hour and a half once a week. But when I was on the high school side, we had 15 minutes every day, every other day. So however you break it down, right, this approach still works. So if you got 15 minutes, maybe today's just receiving and we're going to experiment and challenge for 15 minutes on receiving, and your goal is to come away, with a little bit better knowledge about what you like, what you don't like, and what's working and what's not.
Do you send them with any pregame? I know you don't have them during their competitive season, but do you send them off with a pregame routine that they can do to help them get game ready?
We've talked about it, and I'd really like to. I think it's important for the catchers to have a pregame routine. The struggle I have, since most of my guys are high school guys, is hitting's really important for catchers, right? They're going to progress through their career based on how they hit. So I don't want to do anything before the game that takes away from their prep work for hitting. Right. So they need to hit, they need to catch their bullpen with the pitcher. But if we have extra time, then yeah, I'd like to do something with them.
In a perfect world, say you have the time, what's a prescription for give us like a 5-minute good warm up for a catcher to get ready for a game before they've got to go catch the starting pitcher that's going into the game?
Just getting them through some of the movements. So letting them see some pitches. We probably don't have a machine for the amateur games when they're on the road, but even throwing them some pitches, they'll see pitches in the bullpen, right? Getting them to feel out some kinks with their blocking, just getting some movement going, kind of waking them up a little bit. I think our goal when they go in the game is that's not the first pitch they're seeing, right? That's not the first block they're making. That's not the first throw they're making, right? They're prepped a little bit. They're warmed up a little bit.
That one piece move, how do they know? Like for somebody that's just diving into this presentation, how do they know that it's a good one piece move? Like what are you gauging on that? Hey, that's a good one piece move. When you're relaying that to them, hey, that looks like a good one piece move. What is the deciding factor for that? How it looks and what it's supposed to look like?
Yeah, so we actually measure it with our guys. So we call it GPE, or glove path efficiency. So they'll get videos of themselves that basically show a line that traces the path their glove took from the time the ball hit their glove to when they stopped and presented it. So their goal is to make that line as straight as possible.
So what about really movement after catch? I mean, does it matter? What really dictates, like, okay, does it matter where the pitch is as far as that movement location to then get it back into where you want it to with that one piece movement? Does the ball really just dictate how that movement is?
I think the ball dictates how our pre-pitch movement is, right? It dictates how we approach the baseball after the catch. So all of our post-catch movement should just become straight line back to the zone. Our guys usually work back to center of chest, like chin height. But we don't necessarily talk a lot of pre-pitch movement because they're figuring that out on their own. As long as they're focused on their post-catch movement, right, they're going to have to find a pre-catch movement that works. Right, that's the only way they'll get good post-catch movement.
Because that's kind of where, not fooling the umpire, but that's really what we're doing, right? Because if we can get it back to the same spot every time, we're going to allow the umpire to get into a rhythm of calling strikes, correct?
Yeah, all we're doing is making it harder for the umpire to call pitches, which, some people argue, well, maybe that'll make him call fewer strikes at the amateur level. Maybe we'll make
not when they can't
more.
see it though, right? And this is what I said. Like, I jumped back there. We had a senior catcher at Western Illinois, CJ Schaefer. He was awesome. He was awesome on 2 feet, but he would go to one knee every once in a while. And Matt Risden, who's at Lenore Ryan, he goes, "Hey, what do you think?" I was like, before I make a decision, I just want to get back there and call strikes for a while. And so we had a live bullpen going, and I jumped back there from the umpire's position and called strikes. And I was like, you know what? I'm in, because I'm calling a lot more pitches strikes because I can see it. And you really can't see this movement on the low pitch. You can see it more on the high pitch. But on that low pitch, because the umpire's tracking the ball out of the hand, he's going to miss all of this because he's tracking the ball in. And by the time he looks down to call a strike, all he sees is the catcher's glove.
Yeah. Umpires have a really tough job. It's really hard. And the thing I always remind guys of is the umpire doesn't know what pitch is coming, right? So a curveball can fool the umpire just like it fools a hitter, right? So if he loses track of that baseball at any point, he has to rely on you a bit more to figure out where that pitch actually was. So, right, we're playing the odds, and we're trying to get as much as we can. But honestly, we're just moving the baseball, let that guy do his job. Right? If we both do our jobs, we're going to be happy.
Got time for one more. How much communication do you have with their high school coach? Just from a development piece, how much communication are you having with the high school coach?
Unfortunately, not a lot. I'd like it to be more. Our facility is always open if coaches want to come in. Now, there are schools that I will train with the high school program directly. So for those guys, we have great communication because I'm working with them directly. But I think it's important, right?
Because that should be the goal, right? I like to, they say it takes a village, right? I view the baseball industry as a whole village. So whether it's the facilities side or the coaching side, I view it as one big circle that we're all trying to help players get better and push players up. So however we do that, whether it's on the facility side or the coach's side, I think with more communication, then the player's not getting mixed signals from one side or the other. I just think it's a way to raise the player up together in the baseball industry.
Yeah. Well, and really ideally, the guys coming out of training with me should be well versed in a bunch of different styles. So if they go back to their high school and their coach has a preference on what they want them to do, they should be well versed in it. And if it's something that they really struggle with and they don't like, that they've found something better, they're equipped with the knowledge to have a discussion about it, right? So I think we're doing a good job avoiding the battles of, well, I went to my private coach, he told me to do this. Yeah. And the head coach is telling me to do this, right?
Well, it's just like a player going to a different parent and getting a different answer from a different parent. Same thing with in a team setting, they're going to go to different coaches and maybe get different things. So the more that the player can get a consistent message, much better for the players. So Zach,
it puts the player in a bad spot, right? If he's getting all these conflicting messaging. So, right. Sure. That's why I like this constraint-led approach so much, as it's more player-driven, right? The player's making the decisions. The player's the one that has the knowledge of how he moves, how he prefers to move, what's working for him, right? And he understands why things aren't working, right? So he can have those conversations.
All right, this is a phenomenal lead-in for the catching hot stove tonight. So for everybody that wants to dive in on some more catching, getting a catching hot stove tonight, Zach, I can't thank you enough, man. This was awesome.
Thank you.